All right, we are going to get started. We have one more talk for the afternoon, and then we move into the fun of social time, exhibitor visits, and some roundtables. So lots of time to talk and convene and build community after we hear from our keynote speaker. Before I introduce our keynote, I just want to make note, my colleagues at the UW Extension booth, I just had mentioned in introducing Joel's talk that weed management is one of the biggest issues facing organic farmers. Well, one of the other big issues facing the success of organic farmers is markets and obtaining the prices needed for products and accessing the markets that will help to support the diverse rotations that make organic farmers successful. So UW Extension has a survey to help with learning how to support organic grain farmers in their crop insurance and marketing needs. So after, when we're walking around the exhibitor booth and visiting with each other, I encourage you to stop by the UW Extension booth and help with that survey. But before we move on to the social portion of the day, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Wendy Johnson. Wendy was on the schedule to talk last year, but wasn't able to join us, so I am just so thrilled that Wendy is able to be here in 2025. For those of you that don't know Wendy, she is an organic and conventional grain farmer and grazer in Northeast Iowa. She and her husband Johnny own and operate Jóia Food and Fiber Farm, a diversified organic farm growing food-grade grains, grazing ewes, grass finishing lambs and cattle, custom grazing cows and calves, and selling direct to consumer meats and other edibles. They collaborate with other local farms to help build a robust food shed. She founded Counting Sheep Sleep Company in 2020, a wool bedding business utilizing their sheep's wool. Wendy also co-manages her family farm with her father, currently a 1,200-acre conventional row crop farm. In the last 5 years, Wendy and Johnny have invested in agroforestry practices, adding trees and shrubs to enhance diversity and resiliency to the land and animals. Wendy is an active advocate of all things organic, perennial, and a promoter of diverse enterprises and people on the land. Her curiosity, passions, and experiences have led her to leadership opportunities as a chair of the Iowa FSA State Committee, former board member and chair of Practical Farmers of Iowa, steering committee member of the Rodale Institute Midwest Organic Center, farmer consultant, and federal ag policy co-lead for the Climate Land Leaders, Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative Vice President, Grist 50 list of 2024 climate leaders to watch, and beyond that, other numerous local, state, and regional affiliations. That is an incredible resume there. So with that, it's my pleasure to bring to the stage Wendy Johnson.
That was quite a mouthful, and I apologize if it was way too long. I won't introduce myself too much here because Erin did a really great job. But my name is Wendy Johnson. I'm very, very thankful for being here. I had to ask the organizers several times, are you sure? I'm a grazer, and I am a grain farmer, but I'm also a grazer. And so I was a little nervous. I am a little nervous. So to be in front of all of you who have a lot of expertise in organic grain farming, and I learned a lot from all of you whenever I come to these conferences. So my talk today is going to be about thinking outside the box. What are some things that we can do outside of that can enhance our grain operations? And first, I want to thank the organizers, OGRAIN, but also the people who stood here before me. I recall coming to my first OGRAIN conference in 2019, and Jeff Moyer was standing right here, and I was just in awe. I was just, wow, I was very starstruck. And also a year later, 2020, Fred Kirschman stood here, and so, and there's Gary Zimmer and Carmen Fernholz, and so it's just a real tall order to be standing here in front of you. And so I hope you get something out of my talk today. I also wanted to mention that Fred Kirschman is turning 90 on February 4th, but he's currently in hospice, and he will have a Zoom birthday on February 2nd, and you can find that information on Caring Bridge his wife Carolyn has put together. And so I hope you all can join at some point, or wish him well on the Caring Bridge website. He is the author, if you don't know, of this book, Cultivating an Ecological Conscious. And I'm actually going to, I guess, I am trying to be an ecological conscious farmer. And so I took a lot of pride in reading his book. I hope you all can pick up a copy too and read. There's lots of great tidbits about how to be an ecological farmer. All right, so let's see if I can get through here. Here we go. Oops. Sorry about that. So farming is a journey. And so my disclaimer is that I'm just one story. I'm just one farmer. But I'm really trying to farm with this ecological conscious, like I talked about, and be viable financially. So a little bit about, just a brief overview. Our conventional farm is called Centerview Farms. It was established in 1979, incorporated then, but it was my grandfather and my dad combined their farms and incorporated in 1979, which there was a lot of push to do that at that time. And so what we grow is conventional corn and soybeans, oats, rye, and hay, and we use a lot of conservation practices. Jóia, when I came back, I started Jóia Food and Fiber Farm. I moved back in 2010, but we established this farm in 2014. It's approximately 130 acres, and currently it's mostly a grazing farm. We also graze and grow kernza for grain, but it started out as an organic row crop farm. I've transitioned it from conventional to organic row crops, and we'll talk a little bit about why we transitioned out of organic row crops. I don't know where I point this thing to. So I grew up in the 1980s during the farm crisis, and I am young enough that there was color photos. This happened to be a newspaper article, and so it makes me look really old, but this was taken, I was 3 years old here. But my parents were one of the first farmers in our county to build a confinement animal feeding operation, and so it was a big deal. So newspapers and things came out, and I'm standing in front of that building with a piglet. So I stand on the heels of, or I guess the heels of my great-grandparents and my grandparents and parents. And one thing that I've recognized about all of those generations is that there was some sort of luck that had to happen during their time. And so my great-grandparents, they came from Germany. They immigrated here in the early 1900s. They didn't believe in banks, and so they had cash during the Great Depression. And so when land prices fell through, they were able to buy land. And that's how basically Centerview Farms became Centerview Farms, is through some of these pieces of luck. But when it comes, and my grandparents and my parents also had pieces of luck in their time periods, but it also came with periods of distress. For me, I've been trying to find what that luck is, and there hasn't been a real drop in land prices, and I'm very debt adverse because I grew up in the 1980s. So I've been thinking, well, how am I going to grow? And I'm thinking I need to grow vertically. I need to add value to the products that we produce, and that's how I need to grow the farm. So really quickly, I left as quickly as I could Iowa. I didn't think agriculture was in my cards at all, and I moved to Los Angeles, California, and then pursued a career in fashion, and then of all things, and then I moved to Brazil for a few years, and that is a place where I witnessed the Amazon forest being destroyed for soybean cultivation. But I lived in an area that, Brazil is a beautiful place. I really recommend that you visit, but it has a lot of similar issues that the United States is having as well in terms of agriculture. And during those times of being off the farm, I kept getting pulled back to the farm. And so these are kinds of some of my discovery pieces of how I ended up back in Iowa. And they're part of like going to farmers markets in Los Angeles and going to Brazil and witnessing rainforests being destroyed. And then this middle picture here is really interesting because that's what happens when the forest tries to come back. And then they throw cattle on it, and then it turns into soybeans, which is the lower field on the right. And then just understanding our food system and understanding the amount of chemicals that are used in our food system today really helped me discover, and reading The Omnivore's Dilemma, which was a really outstanding book for me. I think that came out in 2006. So I was very, I guess I always had it in me that I was a farmer, but I didn't really know it. And so when I came back in 2010, I came back with a different viewpoint, I guess. You know, I think if I'd stayed in Iowa, I'd have a very different perspective of what Iowa agriculture is and what my place in it than I did when I left and came back. And so my talk today has some really basic observations and questions that I made. So please be patient with me, because these are questions that I asked myself before I moved to Iowa, and they're questions that I asked when I first moved back. But my dad and I, we compromise a lot. Actually, I do a little bit more compromising than he, but that is part of that generational tug and pull. And when I returned, I want to do all these different things, you know. Let's go organic. Let's add livestock. Let's do all these things. I was very excited and, you know, determined. And he'd always say to me, "But where are the markets? Where are the markets? If everybody was doing it, everybody would be doing it, you know." And so I knew from that point that I had a lot more work ahead of me than I thought. It wasn't just about transitioning to organic. It was more about how I had to think about policy, how I had to think about marketing, I had to think about capital and infrastructure. And that's a tall order for one farmer to do, right? So that's why we found lots of different organizations over the course of our farming in the last 10 years that have really helped bolster and boost up those kinds of initiatives. And it's always at work. It's a process. We're still trying to figure it out. So again, basic observations here. I wondered some of these things. You know, why don't we share information with one another? And I want you to put yourself in this perspective of a bird's eye view, you know, coming back to Iowa, and you're in Iowa agriculture, which is predominantly industrial, conventional. And I think my closest organic farmers were Tom and Irene Franzen, about an hour away, and Margaret Smith and Doug Allert, another hour away. So I didn't have any organic farmers close by. But I was wondering these things. You know, why don't more farmers raise their own food? Where are the farmers? Why aren't they on the land? I don't see anybody on the land. And where's the livestock? And so I quickly learned through practice with my dad that there are reasons for these. There are answers to these questions. They might not be the answers that I wanted to hear, but they're answers nevertheless. So we used to use full width tillage before corn, and we put these sheep out. These are the sad-looking sheep that my husband and I inherited when we moved to Iowa. They were put on the land we couldn't plant corn and soybeans on. And let's see, here we go. On our non-organic acres, we now no-till. So we started cover cropping, we no-till. Ooh, it jumped. I wonder if I could just use the point. I think that's gonna work okay. We started no-tilling our corn and soybeans, which was something in process. It wasn't something that I learned right away how to do. It was something that we started a little bit later when I got my bearings of like how to grow corn, what is N, P, and K, like some of those really basic things. We took marginal acres out of production. We're basically now set up to be organic. Logistically, I guess. We have all of our buffers. We've put these end rows into buffer systems and putting in prairie strips, so that when there is the opportunity to eventually get to organic, we are there. And we use these small grains like rye and oats for a third crop in a rotation. And the goal is for these conventional acres, because I'm working with another generation that doesn't necessarily agree that organic is the solution or the way to continue to become viable. I haven't been able to prove that 100% yet, but to get to organic kind of the long way, using the long haul method of using these cover crops and livestock integration and green manure, and little tillage. And we're starting to trial this on 3 smaller fields where we're integrating all of these things, cover crops and no-till and livestock integration and third crop in a rotation. One, the tilth is amazingly wonderful, but we're able to reduce our artificial fertilizer at least by 40 pounds so far, and our chemical pass, 1 chemical pass. We're non-GMO also, and so we're moving in that direction, but it's going to take time. It's not the 3-year transition that what I was accustomed to when I was transitioning to organic this way. So we all know this is a very simple and basic organic rotation. You can flip-flop corn and soybeans, but this is how we started when we were first transitioned our farm to organic. And it's very successful. It was very successful for us, the rotations that we had it. But as you know, when you take perennial forages out of and you want to plant corn or soybeans that following year, you do have to plow. And so I got caught in a few fields, a few different years, with these more extreme weather events that I wasn't expecting. It wasn't something that I grew up with. I didn't recall ever having these 4 to 8 inch downpours of rain, and I wasn't expecting the kind of flooding impact that I was seeing. So this also helped kind of change my perspective on how we were going to move forward and how we were going to recover that soil loss. So these are 2 different events of rainfall events that we had. I had organic corn here and I had organic soybeans. And we had a lot of soil loss. And so these weather events, we're seeing more and more flooding events happen. We're also seeing tornadoes and wind events that are downing corn. This particular year, we had 3 tornadoes hit down on different fields that we had, and that's what I had to combine, and it wasn't a lot of fun. And we've had a tornado in December, which is very odd. It also mixed with a derecho that moved around a lot of soil, and we have wildfire haze, and we have fall armyworm. The list continues and continues, and I've been trying to figure out how we can become more resilient in times. I don't even think it's just a time. I think this is what's happening now. And how can we become more resilient as grain farmers? And so I had started a combine fire in 2023. We were having 90+ degree days in October, and we were in a D3 and D4 drought. And this really struck me the hardest because this fire was headed right towards my parents' farm and their house. So we're seeing these bigger and bigger events, these more extremes, and these larger disaster issues. And you can go onto the RMA website and look at the different disaster payments that are the indemnities that are being paid out. This was just a snapshot from middle of January, but you could go back and look at all the different kinds of indemnity payments that were made. And we have all of this increased variability. This is from NOAA. It's showing some of the top 6 most expensive billion-dollar disasters in the United States, with 6 being in the last 10 years. And so the darker line is the average. The little gray lines are kind of, this is from 1980 to the present. And the top 6 are very recent. And this is how much they cost, in the upwards of $400 billion. That's a lot of money, a lot of money. So I ask, do we want to be proactive farmers, preventative farmers, or do we want to take handouts and the Band-Aid route? I took this one from, this is from the Climate Hubs. I really recommend you visit these at some point. They give some really good references, or a guide of kind of the historical data. They're taking climate data and looking at it in a technical way of charting it, and they're giving projected information. And so since we're in Wisconsin, I took Wisconsin's here, and it shows that the projected changes upcoming will be similar to what we're having now, but with more extremes, temperatures, precipitation. And so if we know this information, what can we do about it? Are we going to continue to do what we've always done and think that that's okay? Or are we going to become more preventative and resilient? And I guess I argue that I'd like us all to be more resilient in our industry, in agriculture. So more little basic observations and questions, again, from a bird's eye point of view, coming back into agriculture. Why do we continue to grow 2 crops that are really vulnerable? And even in organic systems, like it's corn you farm for that corn year, right? And so, but it's very vulnerable to these extreme weather events. And so why don't we diversify our risk? Isn't that a good business model, to diversify our risk? And then who pays for that indemnity or that safety net? It's lots of different taxpayers. And I question this all the time, but why do we get our agronomic, this is from a conventional perspective, why do we get all of our agronomic advice from one guy? Again, we have to diversify that. We have to diversify. And I really enjoyed what Dr. Groover had said. First of all, it was really cool. I think he's hit a whole new level of being the Wizard of Oz here at OGRAIN. But he made some really good points about that fallow year and that integration of livestock. And it made me think, wow, what if you had just a bunch of livestock you could put out and eat all those weeds in that fallow year and then have a great corn crop, and you don't have to add as much manure. And there's a great conference happening right now too, which is called Grassworks, at the same time in Wisconsin. And just an idea, but maybe OGRAIN and Grassworks could somehow work it out, and there'd be a market meetup for grazers and grain producers, and maybe something could fruition from that. So we all know this farm bill is projected. It's maybe in 2025, we'll see, but it's looking like it's going to be one of the largest farm bills in history. And so, again, some questions like, we plant these 2 crops. If we fail, we sometimes get paid more than if we actually planted and harvested them. And why aren't legislators looking at that correlation between weather and, which is science, the USDA has these climate hubs, and these dollars spent on federal disaster aid? And so I'm thinking it's more fiscally responsible to be preventative than it is to have Band-Aids. So again, bird's eye questions. Some of you may already know the answer to these, but they were questions that I've really struggled with and had. So in the end of December of 2024, to avert a government shutdown, Congress approved a really large spending package to cover these natural disasters, and $10 billion in some disaster payments, and these are some of the disaster payments they'll be coming out with here shortly. But this is a field of corn. It's not my field of corn, it was just upstream from us. We gathered a lot of this water onto our farm. But this particular farmer, he had trees on his farm. And he had a lot of trees, and just the year prior, he removed all of those trees. And I noticed, because I drive by his farm all the time, it's just it's right next to ours. So I notice these things when someone takes down a bunch of trees and burns them. But the water that came out of that creek area, or that stream that he removed all the trees, it held all the water. And then he removed the trees, and I noticed all the water ran into his field. And so he removed diversity from the little diversity that he had, and then these are the types of things that do happen when that is removed. And we as taxpayers are expected to then pay for this kind of disaster. So he's going to get a disaster payment from our tax dollars, but he's not diversifying, he's actually removing things. And so I really question that a lot, and that's why I think a part of me as a farmer has to get involved in policy, because we have a voice, and we should have a voice at every policy table. So again, more basic observations and questions I have. For those of us who don't like to work with the government, why do we rely on them? And what comes first, the markets or the policy or the markets? And we have to grow what we can sell, and we have to grow what's supported. Are we really independent? Are we very dependent farmers? And what happened historically, I think, is a really good to have that better understanding of what happened historically, politically, and what we can do in the future. And so this author, I don't know if any of you have read this book, Land Rich, Cash Poor. It's a Wisconsin author, actually. I don't think he lives in Wisconsin anymore. But this book is very good. And even though, it is from a perspective that I wasn't actually thinking I was going to really enjoy reading, but it is a really good book, and it gives it from a perspective of a Wisconsin dairy farm, but it gives a lot of historical perspective, and I really recommend it. So in my neighborhood, these are the kinds of things that I hear, and these are also quotes from my dad too. So they're peppered in here, but right or wrong, well, some of these didn't come out very well. Maybe they're cut off a little bit, but if you want to grow something different, where are the markets? And right or wrong, you still got to make money. And I don't farm for the environment. And we're farming for insurance this year. These are common things that I hear in my neighborhood at farm meetings and things. And if you look at what has happened politically, it is proven that these Band-Aids are helping farmers. They are working in the sense of Band-Aids, exactly what they are, but not in the terms, I want to stress that we start thinking about being more preventative politically, and that's where the climate smart commodities research, those grant dollars, the Inflation Reduction Act dollars that are supporting these conservation practices of EQIP and CSP and so forth. that there's more baseline dollars in the Farm Bill for conservation, because I truly and honestly believe that conservation builds farms and farmers and increases rural vitality. And whenever I speak to any kind of policy staff, I invite them out to my farm, I always stress that, because it really has. Conservation has built our farm, and I share the reasons why to them. But on the flip side, Band-Aids, they have provided these billions of dollars in Band-Aids, and I'm wondering, what is it that we've gotten out of that? Is it an investment? And if it's an investment, what have we invested in? And so that's why I go back to this prevention over Band-Aids. So when I found this picture, actually, when I was at OGRAIN in 2019, and Jeff Moyer, again, I was like so starstruck with Jeff Moyer and his mustache. And he was the keynote speaker, and he had this slide. He talked a lot about food as medicine in his talk. And so I added a year of data here, but what he was trying to show is this correlation between food and healthcare. And you can still see, like, healthcare is double what our food expenditures are in the US. And this information is so small. I'm sorry about this slide, but really what I wanted to show are just some rates of diabetes and obesity and cancer rates in the United States. And this is from 1980 to 2022, so if you just follow it from 1980, which is the very shorter lines, blue lines, and up to 2022, which is at the very top on the right-hand corner, it has expanded exponentially. And specifically, if you look at, you can't see the year, but it's like around the 1990s when glyphosate was born. That's when a lot of the increase in diabetes. And I don't know, I'm not a scientist, or I probably shouldn't even say it out loud, but I just think that's a really interesting correlation. And the increase in cancers from 1999 to 2021, this is some of the data that I found. The last 2 years that it went down, that was COVID, and a lot of people were not going to the doctor to get cancer screenings at that time. And then these are our rates in obesity from 1960 to, I think the latest data is 2018. So I kind of had this full circle realization while I was starting to farm, is that we need to grow food for people, and we need to grow our business, and we need to have more of that power. We need to have more of that control back, and we need to be more preventative at doing it. And so how I started thinking about, okay, I'm gonna take my moneymaker of organic corn out of my rotation and sucking up soybeans. What am I going to do to make up those dollars that I'm losing from that? And I really had to be creative. If I wanted to take row crop out and put in perennials, I really had to have a very good financial solution for that. And so I'll talk about that in just a little bit, but if you take anything away today, I really want you to think about, really as farmers, how can you get your power back? How can you not be so reliant on outside folks? That could be government, that could be where you get your seed or your fertilizer. Fertilizer is, you get it from manure, but where are we getting those things from, our inputs? We have very little control over farming. That's obvious, right? But the future of agriculture, I think, is about quality, and that's something that Jeff Moyer was pressing in his speech, is that these small to mid-sized farms, we're connecting the soil to human health, and it is about quality over quantity. And that consumers are in the driver's seat. I think he showed a slide about millennials, I remember, and how millennials have this really great buying power. So let's try to get to them as directly as we can. And so that's why we started Jóia Food Farm. Sorry, some of these quotes are outside of I hope you can read them. But basically, we wanted to answer all of those questions and observations that we had earlier when I first started farming. And most importantly, I really wanted freedom, and I focused our work on animal welfare, and that was something that I started out with, and that kind of helped guide us in our ecological conscious farming, so to speak. And we wanted to be healthy, and we wanted to grow healthy food and have healthy plants and be healthy humans. So really briefly at Jóia Food and Fiber Farm, we turned 60 acres of row crop, organic row crop, to perennial forage. We use perennial forage in our crop rotation anyway, and so we kept it. We just want to build soil here instead of lose it. And because we're at the bottom of a small watershed, it was more vulnerable to erosion. And we grazed 25 cow-calf pairs and 140 ewes and their lambs. We use adaptive management grazing. We have about 45 acres of Kernza and CRP. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before. I love to plug Kernza. I think it's the most amazing crop there is. But these root systems are for real. They are really amazing. And these are compared to like an annual wheat at different times of the year. And the soil structure, this came out of a field that was organic soybeans, I remember. And so the soil structure, and it could be because of my organic rotation, but the soil structure that first year of Kernza was like chocolate cake. And this was with 10 inches of water, less than 10 inches of water for that whole year. So in 2023, we had, I think, 12 inches of water total. You probably were similar. And in 2024, we had over 12 inches in just the month of May. And so this is a picture of our farm aerially, and you can see the amount of erosion coming in from all of our other farms around us. And now that we're 100% perennial, I thought this is really powerful because this is showing that we're absorbing a lot of this water before it heads downstream. We're also gained a lot of soil from my neighbors' fields, and one year I think we dug out about 8 tons of soil that we had accumulated in an area that comes in from my neighbor's field. I don't think he'd be so happy if I told him that I gained 8 tons of his soil. So we planted more than 6,000 trees, and we've practiced some of these agroforestry practices and implemented, put in pollinator habitats. We have a silvopasture where by design is by addition, and so we're grazing those areas to keep those trees. We don't want livestock to eat your little trees, and so they're very easy using cattle to manipulate areas to graze. And this is some of our infrastructure that we've set up. And I have to say, like, I am always one to try to find deals. And so I'm always looking out for ways to make these systems work financially. And so there was a session earlier today on all the different kinds of grants that you can get to help you with your farm business. And there's a plethora, I want to say. I hope that continues to be true, but of opportunities of grants from different places that can help with infrastructure needs besides the NRCS, which the NRCS is one of our partners. You can see here, this is just a picture of our adaptive grazing style. So on the light green color is where we were. That's how much we leave behind. And then we go to the next paddock, which is a darker green. And we're able to support on 60 acres, 25 cow-calf pairs and 140 ewes and their lambs. We had over 250 lambs this year, which was amazing. We've had over a 1 to 2 ratio, which is really, really good. I'm sorry, a 2 to 1, I guess it is. And so these conservation dollars really helped, I want to stress, build our farm and our farm businesses, and that's with the help of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And I consider this maybe not I think I heard different maybe from Andy Larson earlier today that, or maybe it was someone else, that NRCS is not a cash flow partner, but they certainly are for us. They have really helped because the IRA dollars, it does act for us as like an ecosystem service payment. I remember when the 823 came out, and I was like ecstatic because I was thinking, gosh, finally, all the things that I have been doing are finally validated through a financial payment. I know you don't want to call it financial, NRCS doesn't want to call it financial payment, but it does help in the cash flow side to really cash flow the things that we're trying to do, which is perennialize our farm and become more resilient in terms of these climate events, these extreme weather events. And so it showed true financially, even without the ecosystem payment. It showed that I'm using a conventional corn. I'm sorry, I don't have an organic corn budget. That's newer, so you put your own numbers in here. But in comparison to these, perennial grazing and organic kernza are some of the higher net income pieces of our farm, and we're actually being able to make it work without, even if you subtract those, the conservation cost share that we received. That's when conventional corn is $4.50 a bushel. Now I think I did this at $4.50, which was just a month ago, and now it's at $4.80. So, but still, even at $4.80, we're still we're making it work. When my dad asked me, how's it going? Are you making money? And I can actually say, yes, we are making money. It is, but we've had to work at it. We've had to really work at it. Because going against the grain means also trying to create the markets. It also means trying to advocate for policy that will help with infrastructure and capital. So it takes a lot of effort, but it also takes a lot of allies. And so there are several allies in this room of nonprofit organizations, of different businesses that are really willing to partner with us as farmers to make this work, to become more resilient, and to take our power back as farmers. And I invite you to join them and tell your story. Excuse me. So we started, this is just a screenshot of our farm business. Excuse me. These are all the products that we supply. We are not supplying them all ourselves. We're aggregating from other farms, integrating them into our business. And so we're sort of like a virtual aggregation, virtual store. And we started a wool bedding business. Counting Sheep Sleep Company is no longer, it was a mouthful to say. So we changed it recently to Jóia Sleep as we continue our branding of this Jóia line. If you want to know what Jóia means jewel in Portuguese. Since I lived in Brazil for a few years, I really love this word. Jóia, I believe land is like a jewel. And as farmers, we rely on that land, right, to make our money, to have a viable farm business. And so not only was I thinking about, okay, we need to gain our power back and start marketing our own goods, but also joining with others and other farmers, like-minded farmers and organizations to build bigger businesses that are helping and support other farmers, many farmers. And so 99 Counties actually came out of a brainchild of Practical Farmers of Iowa, and which is an organization, nonprofit in Iowa. And now it's own, it was taken up by a business owner and a farm business. And it is, now we're aggregating, I shouldn't say we, because it's owned by someone else, but we get to sell, Jóia gets to sell some of our lambs to 99 counties. So again, when my dad says to me, where are the markets? Or other people, where are the markets? I can say, hey, here's some markets, right? And Perennial Promise is a really similar, I didn't help on this founding board to create this co-op, but it is the type of organization and co-op that we as farmers have to start thinking about in terms of how do we market our grains collectively, and how can we do it fairly, and how can we do it where we have the power and not others. So the PPGC is one of those answers for us. We work closely with the Forever Green Initiative in rolling out those grains. Currently, we're working on Kernza, and as a grain, and we're working our marketers, Mad Markets. If you've heard of Mad Agriculture, Mad Markets is their marketing arm. And these are some ideas that I have. You can take it or leave it. There's just so many different enterprise ideas. If you're thinking about bringing the next generation back onto the farm, if you have a younger generation that is interested in doing some value-added businesses, here's some ideas. Biochar, bagged biochar. Biochar is incredibly expensive. I don't know if you've ever looked at it, but you can buy a kiln and you can start bagging it and selling it for a really good price, especially for gardeners. A farm that we partner with creates wool pellets for fertilizer. It has nitrogen in it, and so it's a really great way to add value to the wool and as well start a business. And so we don't have the pelletizing mill, but we were partnering with another, actually in Wisconsin here, a pelletizer. A flour mill, the cleaning, dehulling business, the bagging. There's all of these businesses that can help small grains get started. Even I'm thinking like you could make organic cornmeal and bag that. And we need these businesses, I think, to help also revitalize our rural communities. And if you could consider all of these different business entities on your main street in your small town that you're from, if you're from a small town in Wisconsin or Illinois or Iowa, think about what that would do for your rural community if there were different businesses added to your main streets. And so that's what our next project is to start a brick and mortar food market and food hub. And we'll be aggregating more and more from different farmers, their goods. Hopefully they have these bagged goods. We'd love to sell bagged biochar, and we'd love to sell flour from different farms and rolled oats and such. And so I can finally say we are the market, and that's something that feels really empowering as a farmer. As a side, I guess, benefit is when you integrate conservation onto your farms and onto your lands, there are all these really great ecosystem benefits that come along, and you don't even expect it. And so when we stopped being so controlling of some parts of our farm, we really started to see the amazing things that come back, such as this is a bobolink flying. They're hard to find. They're hard to catch on camera. But we have so many bobolinks now, and dickcissels, and all these sorts of nesting birds that I'd never seen before. You know, I grew up on a conventional farm. We didn't have any of these conservation activities, and so, wow, you like do something different, and all of these things happen, and it's like magic. I'd never seen some of these butterflies come. And then guess what? Like people start getting interested in what it is that you're doing. And so now we're bringing the next generation of people that could be potential farmers onto the land and witnessing some of the things that we're seeing. And it's really cool. Kids just love being outside and being on farms, and that's where they should be, right? We should have more kids on farms and not less. And the scientists come, which is really great because we get a lot of interesting input and understanding of different systems through scientists as they're also trying to understand a lot of things. and the people. We have, I think in this last year, we're not an agritourism farm at all, but we were asked, I think our most that we've ever had is about, last year was 20 different groups that we gave tours to. We weren't advertising. So people are very interested in what it is that we're doing, and it's really great to share. And it's really great to understand and know that people want to know more about their food. And they want to know what it is that we all, as farmers, are doing. And so I really hope that you all can think about sharing your story with other people, because they are interested, especially in the organic community. They're very interested because you're the chemical-free gurus, right? So that's in a nutshell. I hope I don't have a time of how long I've been talking. I apologize if I went over, but I want to thank you for thinking outside the box with me today. And I'm here afterwards if you have any questions. An update. So that's a great question. I was actually going to be here tomorrow. Kernza is, for conventional Kernza, I'm going to say it's not so great right now. We're looking for more markets, and we're really trying to focus on trying to integrate small amounts of Kernza into conventional flour systems. That's an avenue or channel that the PPGC we're really trying to look at. But in terms of organic and regenerative organic certified Kernza, we need more farmers. So if you are interested in growing organic Kernza or regenerative organic certified Kernza, come talk to me. I can give you an avenue of how to get there, but we are needing more acres of organic Kernza. It's a great crop in a rotation, if any of you have planted it before. Especially if you graze it, too.
Hello, hi. I'm wondering what your neighbors think when they see their soil rolling on over to your farm. Are they curious? Are they wanting to ask you questions about what you're doing?
Thanks for asking that question. You would think that they would care more. But unfortunately, no, I don't get a lot of inquiries from my neighbors about where their soil is leaving. And I really think it's honestly because of those Band-Aids. They have the Band-Aids. What's a few inches of topsoil to them? It won't matter until they're out of topsoil at some point. But no, they don't. I haven't gotten many inquiries. Though we did host a field day with Iowa Learning Farms 2 summers ago. And there were lots of actually conventional farmers in our neighborhood, not my congruent neighbors, but others that came that were asking questions. And I thought that was a success, that there were people outside of our normal folks that come to our field days.
How did you talk your dad into trying all these crazy ideas?
That's a work in progress. So my husband and I, we rent acres. And so we're kind of incubating and doing these things on Jóia Food and Fiber Farm on our own. And we are dabbling a little bit. So trying to get into this, into my dad's, our farm. But it is a challenge, and I have to do a lot of, like I said, a lot of compromising, but also there's just, in terms of finances, that is a big deal. I think there's like a rule of thumb, like in the conventional world, like if you have 1,000 acres, really only 4% of that is the amount that you can really dabble and do other things with. And that's in the conventional sense. I don't know about in the organic sense. And so I'm renting that 4% and doing these kind of incubation kind of ideas. But this last year, we did a trial on 60-inch corn with a really great summer cover crop and then grazing. And that was on our conventional farm. And again, we're also dabbling in some of these 3 crop rotations. But again, at a really small scale, not, he's getting more and more open. I think I don't know if he thought that we'd stick around as long as we have, and tried to do these things and push the envelope a little bit. But he's 82, so I think we're gonna work at it. We're gonna keep working at it.
Hi. I'm curious if it sounded like you started with your flock first, but I'm curious if you could maybe share some observations as you added new and different systems and how they have maybe integrated into each other to kind of close those loops and the processes between your animals and the crops that you're raising.
So we first started with the small flock, and as we were, I don't have a lot of organic farmers around me, so I learned how to cultivate on my own and rotary hoe. I'd never managed those tools before in my life. And my dad said, hey, you're on your own, kind of like how I learned to swim. And so it was integrating those kinds of things was all kind of new. And so learned that, okay, I'm going to have a few years of perennials. What do I do with those perennials? I think the first year I took it all the alfalfa off I could, and I sold off all that potassium, I remember, and thinking, gosh, I wish I hadn't done that because there's no dairies near me. It wasn't a very financially good choice. So I learned from that, and I started integrating more grass and legume species to then integrate our sheep into. And so then we started to get really interested in, or understanding how sheep eat and how they grow, and can they do really well on grass and just grass. And then we started to really change the genetics of the sheep flock that we kind of had inherited of 20 really poor looking sheep, mostly polypays. They do really well on grain and feedlot systems, and moving those genetics into more of a shorter, stockier, grass-fed flock. At the same time, I guess this was a little piece of luck, but just like in organic markets, when I first transitioned to organic, I'd been accustomed to this conventional system for a while now, for a few years, and we were pinching for that basis, pinching for pennies. But when I transitioned to organic and I had my first organic corn crop, I couldn't believe the number of phone calls that I was receiving from people that were, hey, I hear you have organic corn, and there was actually a demand for it. I wasn't trying to just give it away, there was a demand, and so that really was empowering, and that really gave me some confidence in what it is that we were doing. And so, okay, I'm gonna integrate just with that, just like corn, I had integrated, we created this kind of grass-fed flock. We certified them as animal welfare approved and certified them grass-fed. And I get some phone calls from some companies that were interested in purchasing our grass-fed lamb. And so learning from that was a market that came to us, and that has been really successful. And then we learned from our sheep how to graze cattle, and I still don't own a lot of cattle. I think we have 5 head, but we custom graze others. I'm very nervous about feeding them over the winter and keeping them fat and keeping them growing with our land base. And so I haven't invested in that, and we've integrated our poultry into our system too, moving them around and eating the bugs and worms and things. And then pigs, we tried pasture pigging. I thought, as organic, we need that tillage right after our perennials, our forages. And I thought, I'm gonna throw some pigs out there and I'm gonna have them till it up. Well, that doesn't work when you get 4 or 6 inches of rain and you're working through mud and you're trying to move your pigs around. It just didn't, and we're near a creek bottom too, and so it just didn't work out very well for us, but we learned from that. And we still raise pigs. They're still outdoors. They still see the sun and the rain, but they're in a more controlled environment than a sacrifice pasture than they are out in the field. So we've learned a lot from kind of we all learn a lot from our mistakes, right? We learn more from our mistakes than we do our successes, and with livestock, we've really done that. And in terms of integrating grazing into Kernza, it's kind of a new realm. There isn't a lot of research or anything that's done with it, but what we're starting to see, we're in our 3rd year of Kernza, is that integrating the sheep and the cattle out there when it first starts growing, like in May. And this is when it's already been established for a year, but getting that livestock, those ruminants out there very early in the May and having them graze in May, it almost acts like they're helping thin out the Kernza, because you get, after harvesting Kernza, such a small grain that some of it ends up coming out the back of the combine. And so it regrows, and that is competition with other Kernza plants. And so what we've learned is throw the livestock out there and have them graze it pretty hard, and it kind of almost thins it out a bit, and so that you get a pretty good grain crop that same year, and then you can graze it again in the fall and into now. We have no snow cover, so, grazing it now. And so we're seeing that even in our 3rd year. The great thing about perennials, the perennial grain, is that you can continue to graze it, and you can graze it really hard, and it doesn't hurt it. And that's a really great part of that Kernza grazing system.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
I just want to say congratulations on a very impressive 10 years of your farm and your ability to experiment and adapt. It's just fantastic. And I'm curious, what is your expected timeline in this new experimentation and potentially the brick and mortar market?
Yeah, thank you. So the brick and mortar market, the hub is going to start here in May. That's the goal, May 1st. And then our second phase of that project is the market, and that we hope to open that in March of 2026. And the first part of your question. Oh, that was just a statement, yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's our experiment. I thought maybe you were talking in terms of like the long haul or the long term of transitioning to organic in a really long way. It might take the rest of my life to accomplish that. We'll see.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, first off, you mentioned that the future of agriculture is tied to quality. So I kind of wanted to follow up on that statement and ask to hear maybe about your employees, your team, and how kind of your staff structure compares to maybe your father's. I would guess there's a more prominent role, human role, in your side of things versus the other way. So just curious to hear about that.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I do see employees as an asset and not a liability. And I think that sometimes has been kind of what I've learned, is that we should be farming ourselves. This is what I've learned in the conventional world. We should be farming ourselves. We can only rely on ourselves and not integrate other people into our operation. But I've been my husband and I have been very interested in how we can get more people on the land and how we can get more people farming. And so we really have tried to get a lot of different, we've had internships, we have an apprenticeship program that we host, and we're really trying to get more people interested and involved in agriculture. But we haven't been able to successfully have anybody stick for the long term, like have employees for a long period of time that will stick around and stay. We live in a very industrial part of Iowa, and there isn't a Madison, Wisconsin nearby, or a Minneapolis, Minnesota, and so it takes someone special to come out and move to a really rural part who doesn't maybe have the ties that that some people do in our community. So that's why a part of this food hub and market is that we hope that there'll be some people that come out of the woodwork in terms of wanting to, they're making the connection in our rural community of food and farm and health. And so, but we still have our apprenticeship program and interns. We have seasonal employees. And currently we're working with a couple. We have discovered that we've been relationship building for the last 2 years. And when I say relationship building, I think when we're trying to find employees for our farms, it is about relationships. It's not a transactional thing. And so we've discovered each other, this couple and us, and we're working on some transitioning some land to their ownership, that they'll be farming with us and farming having their own farm themselves. And we're working through that lease to own ownership with that. And so, yes, it's a really great question. It's a challenge, but it's also a slow process. Relationship building is a process, right? Yeah.